Welcome to the channel where we debunk lies told by pseudo-intellectuals and agents of disinformation. On the chopping block today, South African immigrant Elon Musk. On a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Elon said this.
There's only like six or seven swing states. The margin of victory in those states is small, often like 10 or 20,000 votes. What the Democrat administration has been doing is importing vast numbers of illegals into swing states. You can look at the numbers on the actual government website, meaning you don't take my word for it. You can just look at the numbers as reported by the government, which is controlled by the Democrats. And what we're seeing is triple-digit increases in the number of illegals in every swing state. In some cases, 700% increases.
And that is what propaganda sounds like. I'm sure many of you saw this table before the election, and this table acts as the foundation of this conspiracy theory. Now, I know this isn't as relevant as it once was, but I am the kind of person who does not let a lie go unchecked, no matter the circumstances, and given that Elon Musk is now, depending on how you score these things, the first, second, or third most powerful and influential person in this country. So every lie that he told to get his result in this election should be brought to light. All right, let's get into it. This was actually quite hard to find. I was just trying to follow Elon's advice when he said this earlier in the episode.
Just go to the source material.
But he made it very hard for me because he doesn't cite or reference any of his work, anything he posts, anything he says. And you all know by now that that's because a lot of what he says is just made up. But I did find where this table came from. So this table was first posted on Twitter by Elon and company around October 3rd is when this bubbled up. And then it took off, of course. And to find where it came from was actually pretty hard. There's no references. It doesn't say. There's a couple hints that say court filings, right? But eventually I found this article from MarketWatch from early July, so almost 2 months before the conspiracy took off. And what do we find? Here's our table. And already we can see that Elon has juiced up the outrage with what I like to call a tactical omission when he took out this column rank. When we look at this information, whatever these numbers do mean, we see that they're not quite as sensational when you consider that none of these states are in the top 5, only 2 are in the top 10, and 2 are in the bottom half of all states. So not quite as alarming as we were all led to believe. And now that I have my MarketWatch article, I think I'm in luck because MarketWatch is good about referencing their material. And sure enough, they have a hyperlink to a website called Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, or TRAC, at Syracuse University. When I click the hyperlink, it just takes me to the homepage, which is not that surprising because MarketWatch is known for interpreting data themselves and making their own graphics and tables. So I looked everywhere all over this track website and I did not find a report or a data tool that would generate this particular table. I'd like to say you can trust me that I looked everywhere, but I like to encourage people to look themselves. So if any of you find it or if any of you know where this table originated, if it wasn't this MarketWatch report, please let me know in the comments. But what we do have is the knowledge that MarketWatch said they got their information from court filings, and we have this awesome interactive tool on the TRAC website called New Proceedings Filed in Immigration Court, where we can look up every single immigration court case by year, by state, and we can also see the outcomes. So this set of interactive bar charts must be where MarketWatch got their information, but without knowing their methodology, without knowing what parameters to search for, I can't get the exact numbers they did. I can get close. I can get similar spreads from 2021 to 2024, but not exactly. But this is the source material where Elon's conspiracy falls apart. So the first thing I want to point out is that for every single bar chart, for every single state, there is a dip in the years 2020 and 2021, and then there is a big spike in the year 2024. The dip, I'm sure you all have guessed, is from the COVID-19 pandemic, which slowed court proceedings down dramatically. The spike in 2024 is because the number of actual immigrants coming into this country has increased greatly. And I must say that it is dishonest of MarketWatch to use the artificial dip in court cases in 2021 to exaggerate the spike that we're now seeing in 2024. They would have been much more honest in their analysis had they used the year 2019, which is higher than 2020 and 2021 in all of these states. But if you use 2019, that makes this a bipartisan issue, which I guess doesn't get as many clicks and reads. So as for debunking the conspiracy theory, while it is true that all the swing states had an increase, like I said, all states had an increase, let's examine deep blue Delaware, where in 2021 they had less than 1,000 immigration court cases, and then in 2024 they had over 4,000 immigration court cases. Oh my God, they have 400% more immigrants in Delaware. The Democrats must be flying them in, even though they win Delaware by twice the votes. Now let's look at deep red Oklahoma, where every county voted for Donald Trump. And we see that in 2021, there was roughly 2,500 immigration court cases. And in 2024, there were 12,000 immigration court cases. Oh my God, the Democrats are shipping immigrants to Oklahoma. And now there's 480% more of them who are going to vote blue. Do you see how stupid that sounds? Every single state had an increase in immigrants. And if you don't think that Elon Musk is full of shit and you think he actually does do his due diligence and check source material on government web pages, then I'd like to point you to this tweet where he has the same sentiment. The Dems have imported massive numbers of illegals to swing states. Then he says that through the CHNV program, the Democrats have flown approximately 1 million people into the United States from January 2021 to December 2022, with 3 times as many of them going to Trump states. Now let's check that source material. All right, let's check his number first. We have the U.S. Customs and Border Protection website, and it says through the CHNV parole process, there have been 530,000 people paroled into the country. And if we look at his graphic, he's sitting at just over 2 million, or actually quite a bit over 2 million. So off by a hair on that one. Now let's check his years. We go to the American Immigration Council webpage, and we find that the parole program didn't even start until January 5th, 2023. If you want to be real nitpicky, there was a pilot program for Venezuelans only that started on October 19th, 2022, but that is not January 2021, so I guess another swing and a miss from Elon. It's really starting to look like the bullshit slipped right through his 5-hole when he was checking that source material before retweeting this graphic to 200 million people. All right, so now I want to go over a few facts about immigration to drive the point home that immigrants don't just vote for the party who happen to be in control of the executive branch on the day they immigrated to begin their arduous 5-year process of becoming citizens. The 4 states with the highest number of immigrants who can vote are California, New York, Texas, and Florida. And Texas and Florida typically vote Republican, and California and New York typically vote Democrat. So that tells us a little bit right there. Now let's get into those red states, Texas and Florida, because I find this very interesting. So in Texas, 64, almost 65% of the foreign-born immigrants are Latin American. And then when we check the 2024 exit poll data for the presidential election, we see that 64% of Latin American men, Latino men, in Texas voted for the Republican candidate. So now let's check Florida, and we see an even higher percentage of foreign-born immigrants who are from Latin America. And then we check the exit poll data in Florida, and we see that 64% of Latino men and 52% of Latino women in Florida voted for the Republican candidate. So if you wanted to, you could create your own conspiracy theory about Florida that says the Republican Party for years and years has been flying immigrants in from Latin America into Florida to flip the one-time swing state deep red, because now we see Latin Americans vote majority Republican in that state. But if you think something like that, you're an idiot. A far more obvious and honest answer is that immigrants tend to assimilate into the community that they move to, meaning their vote tends to align with that community's vote. Furthermore, immigrants have a mind of their own, so when it comes time for them to vote, they will choose the party who they feel best represents them. All right, let's move on. At another point in the episode, Elon said this.
The so-called gain of function, again, a propaganda word, because what is the function they're talking about? Death.
Right,
okay.
right.
So if you actually use the right word, this is gain of function is death maximization.
Right.
Then you're like, hey guys, should we fund bioweapon research into death maximization? Because that's what gain of function means.
Well, that's total bullshit. That is not all gain of function means. And on this one, again, I'm going to take Elon's advice.
Just go to the source material.
And that's exactly what I did. In 2014, the Obama administration did put a pause on federally funded gain of function research because of controversial research done in 2012 that involved the H5N1 avian virus and ferrets. And what resulted from this pause was a set of regulations called the HHS P3CO framework, which essentially determined what research would pose a risk to the public and whether or not it should be funded. There are three main types of research that are covered under these guidelines. The first is dual-use research of concern, which is the research could be misused as a weapon. There's gain-of-function research of concern, which generates a pathogen that is highly transmissible and likely capable of wide and uncontrolled spread in human populations, highly virulent and likely to cause significant morbidity. And then the third one, enhanced potential pandemic pathogens, EPPPs. And this is the research that can cause a pandemic by enhancing the transmissibility and or virulence of a pathogen. This is the one that everyone talks about. This is the worst one. And then we check in with the American Society for Microbiology, and they tell us that these three types of research do raise important biosafety and or biosecurity concerns. But this type of research is estimated at less than 1% of the research being done. So I guess that means that over 99% of the research being done is not death maximization, as Elon said. And then we check another source, the NIH webpage, where they tell us that to date, which the date on this is June 5th, 2023, 3 projects involving EPPP research were reviewed. 2 of them were green-lighted, and they have since ended. In the 3rd project, they found a safer way to do it. So this is just more evidence that very little research is actually being done that could cause a pandemic. And now it's really a shame that Elon has called for Dr. Anthony Fauci to be imprisoned. He's demonized him, but he clearly has not listened to all the testimony given by Dr. Fauci in all of these subcommittees in front of the House and the Senate, or he would have heard him say this in response to the question, is there gain-of-function research being done outside of what is considered dangerous and in need of regulation?
Well, I believe members on the minority side have mentioned that. Influenza is a gain-of-function to a virus to make it grow better in eggs. Making an E. coli manufacture insulin is telling the E. coli to do something it wasn't able to do before by mutations. Of course that's the case.
If you're wondering what he's talking about there, eggs are used to make flu vaccines as well as a number of other vaccines, and E. coli is used to make insulin for people with diabetes. So I guess in this case, this is life maximization, gain-of-function research. All right, so this next segment is very funny to me. This really demonstrates how lost in the fantasy Joe and Elon and many of their fans are. Let's have a listen.
If you're doing
insane.
research on that, and the idea behind this research is so that we can cure these things, how come you don't have a fucking cure?
Yeah, start with a cure. Cure first, disease second.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, you guys had no strategy for dealing with it if it got out? And so you have to like make up this new vaccine in like record time, Operation Warp Speed, release it to the people with very little testing. It's fucking crazy.
It was.
All right, so what kind of a moron would think you do research by starting with the cure and then doing the research? Why would you do the research if you already had the cure? But that's not the part that's funny to me. It's the Operation Warp Speed part. Joe doesn't have his timeline straight because check this out.
Today, I want to update you on the next stage of this momentous medical initiative. It's called Operation Warp Speed. That means big and it means fast. A massive scientific, industrial, and logistical endeavor.
That means big and that means fast. That's right. Operation Warp Speed was during Donald Trump's presidency. Joe and Elon are so far removed from the truth and the facts that they don't realize they are talking shit about the guy they just helped win the 2024 presidential election. Now let's listen to a little more of Trump talk about Operation Warp Speed.
We're just days away from authorization from the FDA, and we're pushing them hard, at which point we will immediately begin mass distribution. Before Operation Warp Speed, the typical time frame for development and approval, as you know, could be infinity. And we were very, very happy that we were able to get things done at a level that nobody has ever seen before. The gold standard vaccine has been done in less than 9 months.
So there he is bragging about how quickly they got it done, and he also brags about how they saved millions and millions of lives. But my question here is, what has happened to Joe Rogan? The president of the United States is putting time pressure on the FDA to force them to roll out a vaccine before it's been tested as usual. This is something 10 years ago, Joe Rogan and Alex Jones and all those conspiracy types would have been banging the war drum over. But now they're endorsing that same guy for president. Are they bought out? What's the deal? I don't understand what's become of the conspiracy world. And I just want to say one more thing about this segment. This is just my opinion, but this press conference with the lady doing sign language in the corner was on December 8th, 2020. So he had already lost the election to Joe Biden. But he still thinks he's going to overturn the results. He still thinks his lawyers will make it happen. He'll be able to put enough pressure on the states that he will retain his office. So this press conference is setting the stage. He's bragging about the speed. He's bragging about the lives that will be saved. Had he overturned those results, the entire right-wing mega media machine would be singing a different tune. They'd be singing his praises. We wouldn't have all the demonizing of people like Anthony Fauci. The vaccines would have been considered a MAGA win. And speaking of Anthony Fauci, these two had this to say about him.
The whole Fauci thing, like any criticism of Fauci, it's like anti-science.
Fauci's a freaking demon, if you ask me.
If you read RFK's book, if the real Anthony Fauci, if that's correct, if the facts are in there, that's true, it's all referenced, you could find the sources, and on top of it, he's never been sued for that book, which doesn't make any sense. If he just made a bunch of lies up, he would get sued.
Yes.
So the guy's a monster.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was going to go through that book and I was going to debunk it. I was going to get into Robert Kennedy Jr., but thankfully I do not have to, because someone in this world named Dr. Funkenstein, or that is not his name, named Dr. Wilson, has a YouTube channel called Debunk the Funk with Dr. Wilson. He's a molecular biologist, and he has many great videos about RFK Jr., and specifically, I'm going to put in the description a link to a 7-video series he has about that book that Robert Kennedy wrote about Dr. Fauci. And if you can't tell yet, I am pro Dr. Fauci. I think he has been completely railroaded and sold down the river. I think he should be commended for all the hard work he did during the pandemic and all the hard work he's done in his life. He is literally responsible for saving millions of lives. So I personally find it repulsive that he had to sit there in front of those House subcommittees and be insulted and accused of heinous crimes and interrupted by ignorant pigs like Rand Paul and Marjorie Taylor Greene, whom I've heard recently are expecting, which, if that's true, that's disgusting. So if you're anti-Fauci, Fauci for prison, pro-RFK Jr., and you don't watch the 7-part series, it runs about 2.5 to 3 hours. But if you can't dedicate 3 hours to listening to the other side make their point, then you should. All right, let's get on to the next segment, the final segment. I know this has been running long, and honestly, I put this last segment in just so I could talk shit. But if you've made it this far, you might as well do the small things that help the channel. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you very much. All right, let's watch the clip.
as a Nazi rally. And
Well,
they're still-
MSNBC, they literally showed video of the Nazi rally from the
Yeah.
1930s and then compared it to the Trump rally. Now, ignoring the fact that fucking Jimmy Carter spoke there.
There have been dozens of
Yeah.
political rallies at Madison Square Gardens, dozens on the Democrat side. Like people on X were like, and here's Jimmy Carter, and here's
At a Nazi
Bill
rally,
Clinton,
yeah.
and here's wait a second. Actually, it looks like every presidential candidate has done on the Democrat side has done a rally at Madison Square Gardens. Are they Nazis too?
How can anyone think these guys are intelligent? I mean, they have like high capacity, high functioning brains, but they have filled them with slop. Like, this is what too much social media looks like. Their point is that there couldn't have been a Nazi rally at a venue, Madison Square Garden, because other events were held there that weren't Nazi rallies. I don't understand. It wasn't a Nazi rally because the other night there were some guys in here playing basketball. What kind of logic is that? What kind of a point is that? These guys are idiots. And for the record, I don't think that was a Nazi rally. I think that was a MAGA rally, which will have its own unique spot in history. Anyways, I'm Greb Kered, your ally in the fight against disinformation.